Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Community Matters here on 103.7 WEEI. I'm your host, Scott Cordischi. Glad you could join us. Community Matters, the show that keeps you up to date with some of the things that are happening in and around your community here in Rhode Island, Eastern Connecticut, Southeastern Massachusetts. As many of you might know, April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and joining us on the line this morning to discuss that and everything that they do, she is the Interim Executive Director for the Rhode Island Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Lucy Rios is with us. Lucy, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Thank you for having me. I'm doing well.
Well, thank you for being with us, Lucy. I should mention that in a past life, when I was on the radio full-time, I did a lot of work with Deb DeBeer and Marianne Sorrentino at the time. We worked together at an old radio station that I used to work at back in the 90s and early 2000s. So I'm very familiar with the Rhode Island Coalition Against Domestic Violence.
Oh, that's great. Yes, I had the pleasure of working with Deb DeBeer for many years, and I'm so really excited that she's in the work at the national level, and she's a great friend and confidant. So thank you for being connected to our issue.
Absolutely. So April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. What type of message or messages are you trying to get out there to the public here in the state of Rhode Island?
Yeah, I think it's really important to have a month like this where we can draw attention to the issue and help Rhode Islanders understand that we all have a role to play in ending the culture that contributes to violence. And that there are ways in which they can get involved, not only in events, but in some of our legislative agenda, and just being a real support to victims of domestic and sexual violence at this time. And not just in this month, but all month long, all year long.
Absolutely, positively. And, you know, I've looked at a lot of the statistics, and quite frankly, none of them are good when it comes to domestic violence. And you were kind enough to send Laura some statistics in terms of the state of Rhode Island. For instance, 8,499 individual victims of domestic violence received help in 2021. That number, I mean, one is too many. 8,500 is just a ridiculous amount, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really high. And the scariest part is that we know that domestic and sexual violence are underreported. And
right.
So those are just the individuals that came forward and said that they needed support to be able to find safety for themselves and for their children. But we know that these types of crimes are severely underreported. That's why it's so important for us to really look at this as a community issue because many of them, victims, aren't going to come to our doors, but they are our neighbors, and they are our coworkers, and they are our family members. And so the more that we know about it, the more that we can help interrupt the cycle of violence.
Absolutely, positively. You know, I was looking at the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence website a couple of days ago, and I read one stat, and this just, to me, was just mind-blowing. On a single day in 2020, domestic violence hotlines received 21,321 calls. That's an average of almost 15 calls per minute. Again, just way too high.
Yeah, and you know, and we definitely saw that in Rhode Island, specifically with our own helpline, where last year we responded to almost 14,000 calls through our helpline for help. And you know, the National Network to End Domestic Violence recently released a report, DV Census report, where they track basically the unmet requests for services for domestic violence programs in the state. And for Rhode Island, we had on that one moment in time 61 requests from victims that we were unable to meet because we just simply did not have the capacity to do so. And these requests were for things like transportation, housing, legal representation. But the most alarming part was that 93% of those unmet requests were for housing and emergency shelter. And due to COVID restrictions and just the housing crisis that we're in, we were just unable to meet all of those needs.
You know, I look back at the pandemic, and not that we're entirely through it at this point, but, You know, I've said that one of the great things that came out of it for me and my family was that, you know, I got to sit down with my wife and kids every night for dinner and, you know, would talk about our day. And whereas under normal circumstances, you know, my son might have a ball game, my daughter might have a lacrosse game, and my wife might be working here, I might be working there. And sometimes it's hard for us to come together and sit down and have dinner every night. So that to me was one of the benefits, at least for me personally during the pandemic. But the downside is there were a lot of things that the pandemic affected adversely, and one of them is domestic violence, right? I think there was an uptick in domestic violence and cases reported during the pandemic.
Yes, and, you know, just as you described, for many of us, we had the opportunity to be in our homes, and for too many survivors, they were at home and they were unsafe at home, and so were their children. And so we did see a huge volume of calls come in. At one point in some months during the pandemic in 2020, we saw a 90% increase in spikes to our calls for help. So the pandemic definitely layered another public health crisis, which is domestic and sexual violence for many people.
So you have a website. It's RICADV.org. The initials, of course, Rhode Island Coalition Against Domestic Violence, RICADV.org. Very helpful and very informative, and there's a lot on it. Can you explain to the listeners exactly what they can get at your website?
Certainly. So we have on our website ways in which you can get help for yourself or for someone that you know is experiencing violence. And so we have a how to help section on our website that lists lots of resources from our member agencies and some of our community partners like Day One that provide services for people that are experiencing violence. And then there's also information about not just for survivors, but for the rest, for bystanders, for the rest of the community, that because we know that with the stats speaks for themselves, with 1 in 4 Rhode Islanders experiencing this type of abuse in their lifetime, that the chances of us knowing someone are extremely high. And so there's information on the website to help us recognize the warning signs of abuse, to help us know where the services are right in our own community, and ways in which we can help someone who's experiencing abuse, in addition to information about training. So we offer lots of trainings. Just last week, we had a training on sexual violence on our website, and it's open to the community to attend. So there's information about our policy and legislative priorities on there, and a toolkit for bystander action. So I recommend people visit it all the time because there's always new events, too, that you can attend and learn about that way as well.
That's RICADV.org. We're talking to Lucy Rios, the Executive Director of the Rhode Island Coalition Against Domestic Violence. April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. You know, I didn't realize this either until I did some research for our show, that the leading cause of injury to women, more than car accidents, muggings, and rapes combined, is domestic violence. And so and again, this is a big issue, and I'm not saying, look, it's not just a female issue, right? Males can also be subjected to domestic violence, but in particular, I think too many women are victimized by sexual assault and domestic violence. As I said, one is too many, and the statistics are just startling.
Yeah, disproportionately women are most impacted by this issue, by this type of violence, but for sure, it affects all of us. And that's why it's a community issue, right? And it requires a community response. And just like, you know, the name of your show, we need to have all members of our community, care about this because it impacts all of us.
So your website also has a 24-hour helpline as well. That toll-free number is 1-800-494-8100. 8100. That's 1-800-494-8100. You talked about how many cases go unreported, and we know that to be true. What should people do that are victims of sexual assault or domestic violence that might be afraid to come forward? What is their best course of action?
Yeah, So our helpline is one way in which they can get support for themselves or for someone that they love. And also they can visit our website as well. I didn't mention this before, but we do have an online text chat feature online where if it's not safe for you to pick up the phone, but you are able to, you want to connect with an advocate, you're able to do that on our website as well, anonymously. The other thing I want voters to know is that they're not alone, that there are advocates in every city and town in the state of Rhode Island that are there to listen, to believe them, and to help them come up with a plan to get themselves safe. And all of our services are free and confidential, and that we take that with the, just really seriously and really work to make sure that anyone who walks through our doors feels like they're going to be heard and that they're going to receive the support that they need.
As we mentioned, April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. October is National Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And I know every October, the Rhode Island Coalition Against Domestic Violence, you conduct statewide public awareness campaigns, correct? What are some of the things that you do to bring attention to this issue?
Yeah, so the public awareness campaigns are some of them. We try to make sure that we are out on the shows like yours, raising awareness about this issue. A lot of community training events that community members can attend. Our member agencies are often holding events, even just right now, April 23rd. The Domestic Violence Resource Center is hosting an annual gala. We do a lot of, in addition to training, events where people can get engaged. So sometimes there are like silent witnesses that are displayed on different college campuses. We partner with different sectors of the community. So it might be hospitals, it might be college campuses, faith institutions, to either educate and provide educational opportunities in their space or public awareness activities in their space. So throughout the month, but also all year long. One example that I do want to share is we also have programs like 10 Men, which is a statewide initiative held by the organization where we engage 10 men annually to participate in a year-long program and really kind of skill them up to be able to facilitate conversations in their own community and in their own spheres of influence. So if they are a coach, they might bring it back to their players and to other coaches and start to break the silence around the issue of domestic and sexual violence. Some of the ways in which we try to raise awareness and about the issues all year long.
You mentioned earlier that you're right. This is a community matter that, we should all become involved with in some way, shape, or form, aware of, trying to prevent, etc. So if people want to become involved with the Rhode Island Coalition Against Domestic Violence, or maybe they want to donate their time to help you out, maybe they want to donate monetarily, what can they do?
Yes. Well, one of the things they can do is sign up on our website to get some of our mailings and our e-news. They also can follow us on social media. We get so many people that are supporters of ours online who start doing, birthday fundraisers online or organize campaigns, donation drives online for our network. And so following us online is another way. Attending our training, picking up the phone and just giving us a call and letting us know that they want to be more involved. And that way we can make sure that they are getting information about maybe we're having a hearing or a call to action at the State House, that they can come and spend an hour or two with us helping to raise awareness about the needs of domestic violence survivors in our state, but also supporting our legislative agenda. So those are some of the ways in which they can connect with us.
And what is that phone number that they can call?
401-467-9940.
All right, that's great. So again, it's the Rhode Island Coalition Against Domestic Violence. If you would like more information on how you can help, visit their website, RICADV.org, or give them a call at 401-467-9940. Lucy, thanks so much for joining us this morning on Community Matters. We really appreciate the time.
Thank you so much.
That is Lucy Rios. She is the Executive Director of the Rhode Island Coalition Against Domestic Violence, our guest this morning on Community Matters. We thank her for joining us, and we thank you for tuning in as well. For my producer, Laura Minicucci, my name is Scott Cordischi. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Be sure to join us again next week for another edition of Community Matters with your host, Scott Cordischi. If your group or organization would like to be part of the show, email us at communitymatters@weei.com.